Good Wednesday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for December the 21st. Today, we're reading together from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that you've had a good start to your week so far. I apologize for the bit of the mess in the background here on the video. I am doing some reorganizing in my office, and we're just at the point where I've got a bookshelf coming so I can put some stuff on the bookshelf and get it up out of the floor and off the bed behind me. So until that gets here, hopefully tomorrow, you might be seeing a little bit more of the rubbish back there. So I apologize for that, but thank you so much for tuning in to this reading on this Wednesday. Let me go ahead and get our text of Ecclesiastes up on the screen for us, Ecclesiastes 3. And we'll get to reading here in just a second. Remember, as we think about Ecclesiastes, we're thinking about a text that is wrestling with the realities of life. There's a couple of different approaches to which we can read this work. We can either read it as the teacher, the one who is mentioned as being the one delivering the message here, the Koheleth, whether or not this is an internal struggle within him, trying to understand how what he believes and what he recognizes to be reality sometimes doesn't match up with what he sees. There's also a possibility that this is him trying to instruct someone to live a life that has more meaning. Whatever the case might be, we are looking at some things here, like within this chapter, for instance, how the life that we live, the real essence behind all of it is that God is behind all of it, that God is behind all of these things. And a life that recognizes that God is behind these things is a life that could be enjoyed well. But if you don't recognize God as being in control, if you don't recognize him as having the final say in things, then you can be left pretty frustrated and wondering, well, why does this happen? Or why does that happen? What's the point of this and the point of that? But the point is here for us is that God is working through it all, and he is in control of all things. So let's think about that. Let's read the text with that in mind here in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse number 1, there is an occasion for everything, a time for every activity under the sun, under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to avoid embracing, a time to search and a time to count as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What does the worker gain from his struggles? Verse number 9, I have seen the task that God has given the children of Adam to keep them occupied. He has made everything appropriate or beautiful in its time. He has also put eternity in their hearts, but no one can discover the work of God or the work God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all of his efforts. I know, excuse me. Verse number 12, I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. It is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. I know that everything God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. God works so that people will be in awe of him. Whatever is, has always been, and whatever will be, already is. However, God seeks justice for the persecuted. I also observed under the sun, there is wickedness at the place of judgment, and there's wickedness at the place of judgment, and there is wickedness at the place of righteousness. I said to myself, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, since there is a time for every activity and every work. I said to myself, this happens so that God may test the children of Adam, and they may see for themselves that they are like animals. For the fate of the children of Adam And the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath. People have no advantage over animals, since everything is hevel, or everything is futile. All are going to the same place. All come from dust, and all return to dust. Who knows if the spirits of the children of Adam go upward and the spirits of animals go downward to the earth? I have seen that there is nothing better than for a person to enjoy his activities, because that is his reward. For who can enable him to see what will happen after he dies? And that is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. The most well-known section of this text, obviously, is verses 1 through 8. We hear them quite often. We hear them a lot of times in the context of a funeral, where we recognize that there are just different times and different seasons in life. But the conclusion of the Koheleth here is that it is all beautiful. It's all beautiful. All of this is good. It is appropriate, as the CSB says. And that's because that is how God has made this reality, that there are different times for these different things. And that's just something we have to accept. Something we have to reckon with living in this world. Verse 11, again, it makes everything appropriate in its time. He also has put eternity in our hearts, and no one can discover the work that God has done from the beginning. It sounds very Acts 17-ish, where Paul is speaking to those in Athens and detailing to them the reality that God has created us, and he has made us very special. He has made us with an eternal aspect to us. We see that here in verse number 12, or excuse me, verse number 11. Verse number 12 repeats what we have seen previously in chapter 2 and verse 24. It's also going to be repeated in verse 22. We're also going to see it in chapter 6 and verse 2, chapter 5 and verse 18. This principle that it is good for us to rejoice and enjoy this life. It recognizes it is the gift of God, whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. I know that everything God does will last forever. There's no adding, take away from it. God works so that people will be in awe of him. Whatever is, whatever has been, whatever will, it already is. That, to me, is nothing new under the sun type language. But going back to, again, there's nothing better than for them to rejoice and enjoy the good life. Going back to the end, or going to the end of the chapter, we see that again, that I have seen that there's nothing better, this verse 22, than for a person to enjoy his activities, because that is his reward. That's his reward in this life. In this life, again, going back, tying it together with the first chapter, there is a time for us to enjoy things in this life. There's time for us to work for things in this life. There's time for us to sorrow over the way things work in this life. But we certainly should not neglect the goodness of God in our lives, and we should appreciate what he has done for us. There's a few things that can really get in the way of that: greed, discontentment. The people who are greedy, people who are never content, are people who never recognize just how good they have it. They never recognize just how good God has been to them, and that certainly is a major roadblock to enjoying what God has given us. So we must make sure that we are not a people who are never content, never recognizing what good God has done for us. If we do that, then we're not giving him the proper attention and glory as the great gift giver that he is. Now, the last point for this particular chapter is the mystery of injustice and death. He sees that those who are unjust, they prosper. Those who are just, they don't prosper. But at the end of the day, God is going to take care of them. God will judge the righteous and the wicked. And don't you know that even before that, they're all going to the same place. And in fact, all people are going to the same place that animals go. And the question is, well, are they the same then? Do people have no advantage over the animals, since everything is futile, since everything is hevel, since life is but a vapor? And of course, the answer we would recognize to that is no, there is a difference. Whenever animals die, they're just gone. But for people, whenever they die, there is, again, an eternal factor that we see here, that he has put eternity in their hearts. There's something different that's going on there. And again, God will judge the righteous and the wicked. So as we think about life, we think about how it turns, we recognize that there are just various seasons that we're going to experience in this life. Sometimes things are going to be really good. Sometimes they're going to be not so good. Sometimes we need to take action in a offensive way, sometimes in a defensive way. Sometimes, again, there's birth, there's dying, there's plant, there's uprooting, there's killing, there's healing, there's tearing down, there's building up. Life is, as one famous movie character said, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know exactly what you're going to get. Things are going to be different from day to day and from times to times and seasons to seasons. But again, recognize that God is in control of those things and that God has given us many great blessings, and we need to be appreciative for those blessings. We need to be content with those blessings, and we need to take time to enjoy those blessings. I cannot get past the fact that this is mentioned in four separate chapters. Again, in 2, in 3, in 5, and in 6. This idea of enjoying what God has given us. Now, we noted previously in chapter 2 that enjoyment, that pleasure, is not the end all be all. We must enjoy that in the context of recognizing God as being the one who has given it to us and giving him the glory and not praising ourselves for what we have. So that's a little bit of a summation of what we have here in chapter 3. We'll be looking at chapter 4 tomorrow, which is going to, again, talk about just there's the loneliness, that the subheadings here, the loneliness of wealth. That's one thing that's, I mean, it is a problem it was a problem during the time of this writing. It continues to be a problem today. People think that wealth will bring them all sorts of happiness. And of course, that simply just is not the case. So we'll talk about that some tomorrow. But again, thanks for tuning in on this Wednesday. We'll be back at it again tomorrow here in Ecclesiastes 4. But before that, we'll be meeting tonight for our Bible studies and worship assembly at 7 p.m. Hope that you can join us for that. Hope to see you then. I hope you'll be back in the morning as we read again from God's word here.